Following up my previous videos where I laid out a warband for each faction based on the model selection provided in the Kickstarter, we're going to go a bit more freeform here and discuss the warband variants available as of writing to the various factions. There is a huge variance between factions regarding whether or not these variants are playable using the models provided in the default Kickstarter warbands, where the Heretic Legion and Black Rail are arguably already completely configured for it, while the Iron Sultanate and New Antioch pretty much require picking up other models to make them reasonable to run depending on the variant. In this series of videos, I'll be going over the various variants for the factions, discussing unique equipment of said warband, equipments, units, etc., how this changes your strategy, and then provide an example list similar to my previous videos. I want to preface with a couple of things though. First off, if you're looking at the variants, I assume you already know how the base faction plays, and so will not be rehashing everything I've said in my previous videos about them, only talking about the differences the variant provides in order to save time. So check out those earlier videos if need be. Second is that these lists aren't going to be as optimized, quote-unquote, as the standard list from the pure number standpoint, sacrificing some element of efficiency for the sake of playing into the variant's flavor. They'll still have numerical rationale behind them, but there's plenty of areas where I'll say, grab one more unit of the unique type, rather than have a slightly more efficient or varied list. I figure this is fine, since if you're playing these variants, you're likely more attracted to the flavor and trying to make use of the unique mechanics, rather than just one more default lineman unit. We'll begin with the faction I've played the most, the Iron Sultanate. There are only two variants for the Iron Sultanate, yet they are a lot more fleshed out than most of the variants available to various factions. I play this faction, so the list I provide here are ones I've actually played with some regularity. Just in brief though, the Iron Sultanate typically is your high accuracy faction with some heavy hitting firepower, albeit with more specialized units, generally lower range, and a notable lack of assault equipment options. In this video, we're discussing the Cabal of Assassins variant of the Iron Sultanate. Last time we focused on the House of Wisdom, which represents the alchemists and all their biomystical war crimes produced in the name of Allah. Here, we're looking at the other side of the Sultanate's specialized forces, the old man at the mountain's coked out super soldiers, the Assassins. These guys, in lore, are a very interesting part of the Sultanate, as they operate similar to how the Adeptus Mechanicus is politically enmeshed in the Imperium, where they're a sub-faction of a totalitarian regime that has the closest thing to independence, technically is allied to said empire rather than purely a subject of. They're so disciplined, even the torturers from literal hell haven't managed to get anything out of them. Name of the game of these guys is fairly obvious. This sub-faction has the ability to reasonably have an entire warband of infiltrators, meaning you can deploy way closer to your opponent than they would want you to. We don't do that in this list because there are many scenarios where infiltrators cannot use their ability, so we don't want to spend that many points on a keyword where our budget is already tight at 700 ducats. These assassins use performance-enhancing drugs liberally, and simultaneously can seemingly pierce the time stream, which, is quite something. This warband, similar to the Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent, seems more balanced for a 900 plus ducat game in terms of having a full flavor list, as the assassins, similar to the Hell Knights, are simultaneously the foundational face unit of the faction, but are also a very high-cost elite unit. Normally, I'd jump into the unique mechanics of the warband, but for this variant, we notably center around the assassin unit, which we actually haven't discussed yet at all, since they're not available in the House of Wisdom and not in the Kickstarter warband either. These units are very involved, as you can see by the length of text associated with just his abilities, as you can see here. Going top down, first of note is the cost. This unit, with absolutely zero equipment, costs 85 ducats, more expensive than the leader units of multiple factions, with a worse stat line, so we need some serious abilities to make up this cost. Their stat line isn't bad by any means. Plus 2 dice on melee is pretty much as good as it gets, and plus 1 dice on range means they're not completely locked into melee utility like the Hell Knights are. Surprisingly, no enhanced movement, but at least they have the Infiltrator and Elite keywords. Looking at various units, it seems Infiltrator is universally valued at around 10 ducats. Base plus 0 stats are approximately 30 ducats, with about 5 ducats for plus 1 and 15 for plus 2. So overall, we're looking at about 60 ducats worth of stats and keywords. Elite is harder to quantify since its value depends on the faction a lot, as its main function is armory access, but it's even more valuable in campaign, so we'll just say about 5 ducats for ease here. So at 65 ducats, we're asking about 20 ducats worth of abilities. The first ability is Time Slip, where when an attack misses the assassin, they gain a free 6 inches of movement that does not provoke attacks of opportunity. This can't be used to place you within 1 inch of another model, as that counts as entering melee, but this ability is still extremely useful. Since it occurs on an opponent's miss, there's not much you can do to directly control when it goes off besides upping your evasion chance via cover, range, and items, but when it does go off, you're effectively getting a free dash action, which for melee-centered characters is huge. The biggest way this manifests in gameplay is psychological pressure on the opponent, as now there is significant punishment to miss shots, meaning they'll hesitate to try lineman strategies where their +0 stat units try long-range shots to weaken your elite units out of fear of either setting your subsequent turn up or inconvenient repositioning. Since this works in melee as well, running straight into a group of weaker units doubles this worry as their allies can't easily support them in fear of proccing this ability on top of shooting their allies, meaning they have to choose between ignoring this dangerous unit or lock themselves out of providing range support at other points of the map. It consequently tends to act as an elite unit magnet, as they'll only want to be fighting them with units that are likely to hit. Generally, just a super versatile passive ability, only hindered by the fact that obviously your opponent is largely in control of when and how often it occurs. The second ability is Temporal Assassin, which basically means you can charge attack 2 different units at once with your multiple weapons instead of doing a dual wield attack on a singular target. This ability, in of itself, can be reasonably costed around 20 ducats, since it's basically acting as an automatic rifle, allowing for 2 attacks, but even more interestingly, most weapons or abilities that allow attacks on multiple targets have a requirement of them being somewhat close together, usually within 6 inches of each other, whereas this ability only depends on the assassin's charging distance. So theoretically, you have between a 6 to 12 inch radius from the assassin to choose from, as players may normally space their units a bit to specifically avoid things like blast and multi-attacks. This ability completely works around that. Choosing which targets to end up at the end of the attack sequence is also very nice, as you can specifically choose to end up at the safer target, or choose to shut down a ranged unit while still getting damage on or even a kill on a separate unit. Finally, of course, is Infiltrator, which supplements these abilities much in a similar way that it works for the Death Commando. This ability lets the assassin start in close enough range that theoretically on turn 1, they're within threat range to start charging and taking out some units before they ever get to activate. Only applies on some scenarios though, so sometimes this ability will literally be useless. They also get unit-specific weapon in the Assassin Dagger, which makes the assassin even slipperier, as it allows them to disengage from melee freely after landing a hit, has critical, and has the +1 injury value bonus of a Great Hammer, meaning it negates the effect of standard armor, raising our minimum roll to 3. Now we can start talking about the Warband variant's unique elements. First off are the rule changes. Normally, you can only have 1 assassin, but in this warband we can take up to 3, with one of them getting the keyword tough, making them a proper leader unit. They gain the ability to give 3 Azebs the infiltrator keyword at the cost of 10 ducats each. This is fun if you really want to go all in on having the majority or entirety of your army spawn in unconventional locations on the map, but as mentioned, since it's not guaranteed this ability will work at all, it's a tough sell to overinvest in it at this warband's price level. This variant loses access to most of the units in the faction. The Usbaze, the Alchemist, Janissaries, Lines of Jabir, and Brazen Bulls are all gone, with only the Janissaries getting a replacement unit. You get the ability to take a singular fire team in this variant, extremely useful on units with Infiltrator since they typically want to be moving as early as possible, but also useful for catching your non-infiltrating units up quicker or allowing them to focus fire more efficiently. The replacement unit for Janissaries are Dervishes, which has the same limit of 4 units, loses the ability to equip reinforced armor, and most crucially loses strong, changing up their equipment selection a lot. You do gain a new ability though instead, where they no longer suffer offhand debuffs, so dual wielding is very efficient, and even more impactfully, all range attacks take a -1 dice penalty to hit them, rendering them effectively immune at 15% hit chance from grunt infantry at long ranges, meaning they can close gaps on early turns, make use of their multi-hit melee more consistently. Much like how in the House of Wisdom, there were upgrades one could take for the Alchemist, we get unique upgrades for the Assassins in this variant. Same restrictions of 1 per unit and no duplicates. Hallucinogen Disguise is just an upgrade to Infiltrator, removing the line of sight restriction and negating the items that usually counter infiltration. Can be impactful depending on the map and composition, but is a bit pricey in my opinion for an upgrade that, as it's tied to Infiltrator, will not always even be able to activate once in a battle. Thunderbolt of Alamut gives enhanced movement up to 8 inches, and a +1 dice to dash actions, greatly improving an assassin's maneuverability and consistency in getting its dash off. Watch of Time just applies a flat -1 dice to both ranged and melee attacks against the assassin, which is the best option in my opinion, not only for the cost of 15 ducats, significantly upping your dodge chance, but this compounds with the assassin's time slip ability, making attacking your assassin an even riskier prospect than it already was. Secret Paths more or less allows you to delay the deployment of the assassin until the second turn. We would have to build specifically around this for it to be worth it, and in my opinion is too conditional on map layout and scenario to be a go-to pick, especially at lower cost thresholds. On to the unique equipment available to this warband. First off is the Golden Khanjar, daggers blessed by Gramps himself. These have the +1 injury roll value effect similar to the assassin's dagger, but gives you an extra attack instead of the ability to retreat. Your chances of killing is already increased from its base property, but adding a second attack on top of that really helps us out. You can even dual wield these, giving your assassin potentially 4 melee attacks as a standard round, shredding the opposing unit. The Bow of Alamut is the big weapon of this variant, and what a weapon it is. At 40-inch range, it is only outclassed by sniper rifles, but not only does it not have risky attached to it, keeps the critical keyword, and it also ignores armor as a default property rather than only doing it on crits. The real spicy part is the active ability though, where, after a successful attack that causes damage, the assassin can straight up teleport into melee with said target. The whole map is only 48 by 48 inches, so this effectively allows across the map teleportation. And to top it off, this doesn't count as a movement action, meaning you're free to use your move action after stabbing this poor target. This naturally compounds with the Assassin Dagger, letting you freely disengage from targets you've meleeed, meaning you could theoretically set it up such that you shoot a model, teleport to it, stab them, disengage, and potentially use some blood markers to ensure your dodge in the follow-up, allowing you to reposition even more just to restart this cycle. And you can confidently retreat and know they'll have to chase you more to keep up relative range status. The last of the unique items is the Hashashin Leaf, which is a 5 ducat consumable which gives any unit strong for the battle. This is an extremely useful item as it opens up significant equipment versatility, allowing for more powerful melee and ranged weapon usage, namely that of the Siege Jezzail. So, let's start looking at an example warband. This list invests heavily into the assassins as they're the stars of the show, with some support units primarily for objective defense. Your job with this squad is to be very annoying to your opponent, with devastating infiltrators and surprisingly annoying baseline units. Starting with the Master Assassin. This guy is identical to a normal assassin, except that he has Tough, making him the leader unit for this warband. At 95 ducats without any equipment whatsoever, we have to hard commit to equipping this unit to make him worthwhile. We give him the warband's 1 allotted alchemist armor, greatly increasing its survivability, especially against the forces of hell that heavily utilize fire and gas-based weaponry, as it actively neuters those attacks on top of ignoring the bonus markers. We complete this cozy armor suit with a helmet, removing any bonus keyword danger whatsoever. I take the Mirage of Time upgrade for this unit, providing a -1 dice to all attacks against this unit, an extremely potent survivability increase. For example, a mid-tier unit with +1 range dice, attacking the Master Assassin at long range goes from a 58% chance to hit all the way down to a 33% chance, almost halving those odds. The baseline infantry with only a neutral stat only now has a 18% chance of hitting at long range. The reason I'm specifying long range survivability is that ideally how we want to play this guy is constantly attacking and retreating, which will make sense when looking at the other equipment he has, but overall this ability enhances his other elements significantly, especially when you consider that at base, the assassin gets benefits from every unsuccessful attack attempt in the form of time slip, so lowering hit chances has a more substantial benefit than it does on other units. For weaponry on the Master Assassin, we've given him the Bow of Alamut, which, as we've already discussed, is a powerhouse of a weapon in pure stats, but the teleportation ability allows for some true havoc to be wreaked by our unit here, as this will put him immediately into melee, wielding an assassin dagger in the main hand and a sword in offhand. Hitting with the dagger frees up our assassin, who theoretically has now killed or severely wounded their target, to disengage completely, as they have used no movement actions at all up to this point, so should have full movement available. The sword just provides a cheap extra attack opportunity, but with critical keyword, which in general you should take on any unit that has at least +1 melee dice, if you can spare the ducat over a trench club. The regular assassin is no slouch in equipment either. Obviously, we cannot take an alchemist armor or bow due to limitations, but instead we're going full blender with this man. Reinforced armor and a gas mask for defensive equipment provide important protection for our elite unit. We choose gas mask over helmet solely on the premise that you're fighting forces of hell that are more likely to use gas over shrapnel weaponry. His special upgrade is the Thunderbolt of Alamut, granting this guy 8-inch movement and a bonus dash dice, making his map transversal quite good, even without the teleportation shenanigans the Bow of Alamut provides. Porting this is a Mountaineer kit to give his climb actions also +1 dice. This is admittedly just spare ducat spending, but it does give the assassin more mobility options that may come in extremely useful depending on the map. Onto his weaponry, starting with the boring aspects, the grenades. Assassins aren't inherently limited in ranged weapon options, but practically nothing in the Iron Sultanate arsenal provides assault, which we really want with this build, and a bonus shrapnel marker is appreciated for making the subsequent attack even nastier. We have this assassin dual-wielding the Golden Khanjar, meaning this guy has 4 melee attacks available to him, 2 of each weapon. Obviously one can choose to blender down a single target, but this build makes some good usage of the Temporal Assassin ability, as it allows you to get 2 attacks on 2 separate targets, as the double attack is on each weapon, which on an unarmored target gives you a 93% chance of downing each one, meaning you can really tear light units in half, and chip away at stronger units very consistently. This is who we want infiltrating close as possible to the enemy grunts and quickly reducing their numbers before they ever get the chance to do anything. Now for the non-elite units of this warband. Since we've spent nearly 500 ducats on the assassins, we're going to get very economical here. We take 2 Azebs just equipped with a standard Jezzail and alchemical ammo combo for our cheap, accurate infantry that is going to pretty much just try to get an objective or 2. Nothing much else to say about them that we haven't already said in our other videos. Great for the cost, keeps them out of melee. We don't spring for the infiltrator cost bonus on these guys despite having the option, as at 700 ducats it's not really worth it due to the situational nature and poor equipment we have given them. To support these guys though, we get 2 sappers. These guys have a pseudo-infiltrate where they can deploy much closer to the midline than standard units. This helps keep the flavor of our non-standard deployment shenanigans, but in a more reasonable manner at our cost threshold. We made them a fire team mostly for the purposes of round 1, although of course they'll be useful later, but on round 1 we have both of them move forward as early as possible and set up minefields on the same activation, either for the purposes of denying objective pathing or protecting the Azebs. Once that's done though, we'll notice how we don't have identical sappers. One of them is your typical sapper loadout, with the ally boson and shield providing them actually significant defense, which of course can be further bolstered by fortification, and close range blood marker potential. He gets a trench knife since he can't use his shovel as a trench club in melee due to needing 2 free hands for that. With a natural +1 range dice, alchemical ammo gives these guys +2 range dice, making them extremely likely to hit their shots. The other sapper is packing quite the danger, as we've doped him up on some leaf, meaning that he can wield the Siege Jezzail with no issue, giving this warband some needed long-range firepower besides the bow. +1 injury dice is devastating, as has been mentioned before, making even units in reinforced armor still more than likely to go down than not, around 53%, and outright killing unarmored units at the same rate. Melee rushes are less of a concern for these units, as the aforementioned minefields can make even the toughest units in most factions flinch. Taking cover at the end of turns, regardless of position, helps them in ranged duels as well, allowing them more risky positioning than your standard units can make. The 2 sappers work well together or separated, with the strong one being more suited to assisting the assassins and killing work, while the shorter range one can help keep the Azebs safe and lock down an objective. The Azebs are really just there to occasionally shoot things and sit on objectives if possible. The assassins are doing the heavy lifting in this warband, meaning you have to play with them a lot more impactfully to make them worth the cost of over half your warband. As with any list that focuses on super elite units, you're inevitably going to have bad luck headshot at some point that drops 1/3 of your warband's value, so play it smart. Slenderman, the Golden Khanjar wielding assassin, should really make use of his ability to cripple and kill multiple units a turn early on to make your opponent's turn 1 very disarrayed. And the Master Assassin can get good damage on single targets while being much tankier and harder to hit due to his upgrade armor and toughness combo, ideally serving as the main aggro draw for your opponent as your foot soldiers catch up to the action. It's a high-risk, high-reward warband, as is the nature of wartime assassination, and it's very easy to end up surrounded with no support due to a series of bad rolls. But when you do get your round 1 in well, it's almost decisive on the game state, as you've likely removed multiple units before they can even contribute to the game at all, and your opponent has to dedicate resources to dealing with your 2 monsters in the backline rather than rushing ahead and grabbing objective points. So, the unit summary is as following. 1 Master Assassin, equipped with the Bow of Alamut, totaling 234 ducats. 1 Assassin dual-wielding Golden Khanjar, totaling 200 ducats. 2 identical 35 ducat Azebs that at some point later one could upgrade to Acolytes. 1 standard sapper at 93 ducats. And finally 1 juiced sapper equipped with the Siege Jezzail at 103 ducats. This totals out to 700 ducats flat. Natural upgrades include acquiring a dervish or two, a third assassin, or even another Azeb that you can create an acolyte trio out of. Let me know if there's a specific warband you'd like me to take a look at. Thanks for watching if you made it this far.